I should have known from the way he looked at me when I asked for her hand. Her father, Richard Maynard. That look, the kind of man gives a stain on a white tablecloth. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just raised an eyebrow and said, "You're a mechanic, right?" That was his favorite way to say nobody. Not loud, but precise. He wasn't wrong, not technically. I had worked in a garage when I first met Ava. By the time I proposed, I was running 3 of them and negotiating a 4th. But men like Richard didn't count grease-stained money as real money. Ava said he'd come around, that he was just old-fashioned. I believed her because love makes a fool out of logic. I loved her like air. She loved me like a secret. Maybe that should have told me everything. The wedding was a cathedral of contradictions. White flowers flown in from Ecuador, crystal chandeliers, a band that charged more than I made in a month back then. Her family paid for it all. I offered, and they politely declined, which now feels like the first of many exclusions. They wanted the stage. I was the backdrop. Still, I smiled. I showed up in my best navy suit, cheaper fabric, tailored well, and stood at the altar believing in her. She looked breathtaking. That part, I'll never rewrite. When she walked toward me, eyes locked on mine, veil swaying, I truly believed we were choosing each other, no matter what the world thought. We were married just before dusk, danced under string lights, kissed between courses of braised duck and laughter. I held her hand the whole time. I felt like I belonged. Until he stood. Richard tapped his wine glass with a gold ring the size of a thimble. The clinking silenced the tent. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment he welcomes me in. I braced myself for something awkward but warm. What I got was, "Well, folks," he started, pausing like an actor waiting for the cue. When Ava brought him home, I thought it was a phase. Chuckles. I figured, every girl's got to date a mechanic once. Get it out of her system, right? Louder laughter. Not from Ava. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, but her bridesmaids laughed. Her uncle laughed. Even the DJ smirked. And yet, here we are. He held up his glass. To my daughter, may your ambition never slow down. And to her husband, may you learn to keep up. I laughed too. Small tight. Like a man caught in a bear trap who doesn't want the bear to know. I said nothing. Just raised my glass and drank. The night went on. They danced. They drank. They cheered. But a crack had split something inside me. Not because of what he said. I'd heard worse in my life. But because of how silent she was when he said it. She didn't flinch. Didn't grab my hand. Didn't shake her head. She let it land. And in that moment, I wondered if deep down she agreed. The final song played. People started slipping off their shoes and hugging goodbye. Ava excused herself to freshen up. That's when I stood up. I clinked my glass. People turned, a few already grabbing their coats. I saw her returning from the tent's side flap, freezing mid-step. Before everyone heads out, I said, steady voice, heart hammering, "I'd like to give one last toast." Murmurs. A few OS. Her father sat back, smug, like a man watching a child ride a bike for the first time. "I want to thank all of you," I began, "for being here today. This has been a beautiful night. A celebration of love. Of partnership." I looked at her. She stood just past the circle of light, veil now pushed back, bare shoulders tense. "I came into this family knowing I wasn't what you expected," I said. "But I loved her. Fully. Honestly. Without hesitation." Someone near the back nodded. "And tonight, I got clarity. Real clarity. Sometimes it doesn't come in a lightning bolt. Sometimes it comes in a toast, dressed up as a joke." A few stiffened. I've been called names before. Poor. Dirty. Uneducated. But nobody ever told me to my face that I was temporary. Now you could hear breathing. So tonight, I want to thank you for showing me the truth before I wasted more of her time. Or mine. I pulled off the ring. Held it in my palm. "Ava, I love you. But I won't chase someone who's still deciding if I'm worth standing next to." Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. I turned to her father. "And Richard," I said, smiling, "you were right. I was the wrong man. But not for the reasons you think. I was wrong to believe this family wanted me. I was wrong to think respect would come if I earned it. So tonight, I stopped trying." I set the ring on the table. Raised my glass one last time. "To truth," I said, "however late it comes." And I walked out. Into the night. No suitcase. No fight. No drama. Just air. Cold, sharp, honest air. I remember the sound of my shoes on gravel as I walked away from that tent. The muffled thump of music still playing behind me. Laughter strangled midair. People not sure if they should run after me or pretend it didn't happen. No one did. Not even her. That was the part that stuck. Not her father's insult. Not the gasps. Not even the flash of the photographer catching my exit like it was part of the show. No, what stuck was her silence. I didn't hear her call my name. Didn't hear her footsteps. Didn't hear so much as a whisper from her as I walked toward the rental car. The valet was confused. I tossed him the stub and said, "Keep the rest of the night open. I won't be needing it." He handed me the keys without a word. That night, I drove with the windows down. No music, just air. I ended up at a diner 2 towns over, sitting at a booth under flickering fluorescent lights, still in my suit, the ring now in my jacket pocket. I ordered pancakes, not because I was hungry, but because it felt grounding. Syrup, butter, coffee in a chipped mug. The waitress didn't recognize me, and I was grateful. She asked if I was okay, and I told her I'd just left a wedding. "Yours?" she asked, smiling. I nodded. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. But then she just said, "Well, congratulations, or I'm sorry. Whichever fits." I laughed, and it felt real. The first week was quiet. I stayed with an old friend, Nate, who didn't ask too many questions. Just handed me a beer, gave me the spare room, and left me alone. That was all I needed. Just space to breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat with the echo of everything I didn't want to admit. I kept replaying the toast in my head. Not mine, but Richard's. "May you learn to keep up." Like she was a racehorse and I was some barnhand trying to keep pace. But the truth? I'd never tried to slow her down. I always celebrated her. Every raise, every new roll, every late night at work when I made dinner and left it on the stove. I wanted her to fly. I just thought she'd want me with her. Looking back, maybe she never did. There were signs. The way she'd introduce me. "This is Caleb. He owns a few garages," always with that slight shrug, like she was bracing for someone to ask if I was also her mechanic. Or when we'd go to events, and she'd insist I wear a different tie. "That one's fine," she'd say. "But it doesn't look like you run your own business." As if who I was wasn't enough unless it was dressed up. I started to understand something during those weeks alone. Maybe I hadn't just been rejected by a father-in-law. Maybe I'd been slowly edited out of her life for months. She texted. Once. Just said, "Can we talk?" I left it unread. Ava didn't chase me. Not really. I think she expected me to come back. To apologize. To take the high road and sweep the mess under the rug. That's what I'd always done when things got tense. But this wasn't a fight. It was a fracture. And some fractures can't be mended with duct tape and good intentions. A week became a month. I moved out of the apartment we were supposed to share after the honeymoon. I canceled the lease before we even moved in. She tried to contest it, said she'd put down the deposit. She hadn't. Her father had. He tried to call me too. Left a voicemail, carefully worded. "Caleb, I think emotions ran high that night. Let's be grown-ups." I deleted it. But here's the thing. Pain doesn't stay in one place. It spreads. It sinks into your routines, into your mornings, into the way you avoid looking at couples on the street. It wasn't just losing her. It was realizing how much of myself I'd twisted trying to be what she needed. And still wasn't enough. I started rebuilding. Quietly. Moved into a 1-bedroom above one of my garages. Woke up at 6. Poured coffee. Answered emails. I got back to the parts of me that made sense. The smell of engine oil. The clink of tools. The satisfaction of fixing something broken and knowing it would run again. People around town started asking what happened. I kept it vague. She wasn't who I thought, I'd say. Or sometimes just didn't work out. No one pried. The one person who did show up unexpectedly was her brother, Mark. A month and a half after the wedding, he knocked on the garage door after hours. "I had to wait until the smoke cleared," he said. I handed him a beer. We sat on crates in the back, surrounded by mufflers and the scent of brake cleaner. "She's not okay," he said finally. "I figured," I replied. "She cried. Said you humiliated her." I nodded. "She wanted you to fight for her," he added. That made me look up. "Funny," I said. "I thought she'd already picked her team." Mark sighed. "I think she just wanted you to prove him wrong." By enduring it. He had no answer for that. Weeks turned into seasons. I stopped checking her social media. Unfollowed her friends. Stopped walking past places we used to go. Instead, I poured myself into work. Opened that 4th location. Hired a couple kids from trade school who reminded me of who I used to be. Wide-eyed, rough around the edges, full of grit. One day, I walked into the shop and saw one of them proposing to his girl right there in the lot. Nervous, stuttering, holding a little box with a ring inside. She screamed yes, threw her arms around him, grease stains and all. Nobody called him a phase. Nobody asked if he was good enough. They just saw love, plain and proud. And I smiled, really smiled, because it reminded me that not all love needs to come with a pedigree. Some of it just needs to be true. 6 months passed before I saw her again. It was a fundraiser downtown, one of those sleek, overpriced galas for causes no one in the room really understood. I was invited by a client, one of my new partners. We'd just signed a deal that would triple my company's footprint across 2 states. I almost didn't go. The tux didn't feel like me. But I'd spent months rebuilding not just my business, but myself. And I wasn't going to keep hiding from places just because she might be there. She was. Of course she was. I saw her from across the room, standing near a glass sculpture that looked like it cost more than my first shop lease. Same elegant posture. Same careful laugh. She was holding a champagne flute like it was armor. She didn't see me at first, but eventually, her eyes caught mine, and it was like someone unplugged her. I nodded. She hesitated, then walked over. We were inches apart, surrounded by strangers who had no idea what history danced in the silence between us. "You look good," she said, voice lower than I remembered, like she was afraid of it cracking. "You too," I replied. "I didn't expect to see you here. I wasn't sure I'd come." A beat. Then she said, "I've thought about that night. About the toast." I waited. I was embarrassed, angry, but mostly at myself. Still, I said nothing. I should have stopped him, or said something after. "Why didn't you?" I asked. She looked down. Because part of me believed him. I exhaled slow, not out of anger, just release. "I didn't want to believe it," she added. "But I was scared. Of what people thought. Of what marrying you meant in their eyes." "And now?" I asked. "Now I see what it meant in yours." We stood there, just breathing. The music pulsed low in the background. A waiter walked by. Neither of us moved. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I don't regret walking away." She nodded. "I get that." I reached into my pocket. Not for the old ring. I'd gotten rid of that months ago, but for something else. A small chain. On it was a key. "This," I said, "is the key to the first garage I opened. The one you never visited." Her eyebrows furrowed. "I keep it as a reminder," I said. "Not of you. Of me. Of who I was before I started asking for rooms that didn't want me." I handed it to her. "Keep it," I said. "Not out of sentiment. Just as proof that you once loved someone who didn't need your father's approval to be real." She took it, hands shaking a little. "Goodbye, Ava." I walked away. Didn't turn back. I never married again. Not yet, anyway. But I built something better. Peace. My name became known in circles that never used to take my calls. I bought the building where Richard's company used to lease their downtown office. They moved 2 years ago. Couldn't afford the rent. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers that night. If he regrets the toast. If he sees my name on business filings and finally realizes what he dismissed. But I don't need him to. Because that last toast wasn't revenge. It was a declaration. Not just to them, but to myself. That I would never again beg to be seen. That I would never again shrink to fit in a photograph someone else staged. And that love, real love, isn't earned by proving your worth. It's recognized without question. That night at the wedding, I left behind more than a ring. I left behind the version of me that needed applause. And the silence I stepped into? It's never been louder with truth.